With everything going on, it's sometimes easy to forget there is a Republican primary still technically going on. So before I explain all this, let me just acknowledge I don't agree with Nikki Haley on that many policy things. But I can still acknowledge that today in her home state of South Carolina, she gave a pretty solid speech, or what I would consider a pretty solid speech. And it wasn't even her first solid speech. I mean, she's been giving speeches like this for weeks, delivering attack line after attack line, making the case against her opponent, Donald Trump.
He's gotten more unstable and unhinged. He spends more time in courtrooms than he does on the campaign trail. He refuses to debate. He's completely distracted. And everything is about him. He's so obsessed with his own demons from the past, he can't focus on delivering the future Americans deserve.
I mean, if you're watching at home, you might be thinking, okay, Nikki Haley, what else do you have up your sleeve? I mean, she called out the cowardice of her fellow Republicans who are honest only behind closed doors, she says.
Of course, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud.
Again, lots of people should be able to get their arms around that. I mean, she made every argument and landed lots of hits against Trump and everything he stands for. The problem is, and this is a pretty big one for Nikki Haley, it doesn't really matter. Just take the primary split screen today. I mean, just 6 hours later at a Fox News town hall, Donald Trump gave his usual version of a conspiratorial, grievance-ridden, slightly outrageous performance. In any other world, or in any case study in a political science classroom, it's obvious who people voting would choose in this race. I mean, the younger conservative former governor, who isn't crazy, who shows discipline on the stump most of the time and in debates, over the often unhinged dictator in waiting facing 91 criminal charges across 4 jurisdictions. But all of this is a reminder that the outcomes of campaigns are not determined by academic exercises or deciding on paper between people's resumes or cocktail party debates, of which many are happening around the country, especially on the East Coast right now, on either side of the aisle, by the way. They are about what voters think and want, which is not always predictable and does not always make sense. 4 days ahead of their primary in South Carolina, Donald Trump is ahead by nearly 30 points in Nikki Haley's home state because the Republican electorate wants Donald Trump. And if nothing else, the complete ineffectiveness of Haley's no-holds-barred campaigning over the last few weeks tells us this was never about the message of the other candidates. It has always been about the weird, hard to explain at times or understand at times, loyalty of the Republican base for Trump. David Plouffe was the campaign manager for the 2008 campaign and later served as senior advisor to President Obama. Sarah Longwell is the publisher for The Bulwark and host of the Focus Group podcast, and they both join me now. So, Sarah, let me start with you. I mean, because the Haley speech was pretty solid. She's given a bunch of solid speeches. I know David Plouffe and I have talked about some of her solid speeches in the past. It doesn't seem to matter. Can we just dispel the notion that anything would have been different had she or anyone done this sooner? Or how do you look at that?
Well, I mean, look, I think that something could have been done sooner, but I'm going back to sort of like the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, when there was still kind of a contingent of move on from Trump folks. I mean, it honestly has nothing to do with Nikki Haley. In a different world, Ron DeSantis was a different kind of candidate, meaning a good one, with a different kind of strategy, also a good one, which he didn't have, right? He tried to wrestle Trump for the always Trump voters who love Trump no matter what, instead of trying to consolidate sort of the move on from Trump voters that existed. Okay, so I do think there was a moment for something to be done. It passed a long, long time ago, though. Nikki Haley, her big problem is that voters do not want a regular politician. GOP voters, primary voters, they don't want a pre-Trump politician. And Nikki Haley is both of those things. I mean, simply by attacking Donald Trump, voters in focus groups in South Carolina said that she sounds like a Democrat. We talked to two-time Trump voters just last week, and
Yeah.
they think they can't trust her. She sounds like even though she was their governor, they sort of don't remember that period of time when she was their governor. She is defined to those voters in her home state as somebody who is oppositional to Trump, and that means they can't trust her.
I mean, she has a lot of positions that if she were actually giving him a run for his money, Democrats would hate, which is what's so interesting about this. So, Lev, let me ask you about this Fox News town hall, which I presume and hope you did not watch, but it was pretty predictable. And Trump knocked Nikki Haley in it. And I want to ask you about this because you and I have talked before, the night of the New Hampshire primary specifically, about how Trump doesn't really have like self-control. I mean, he likes to punch down a lot. Why is he even bothering in your view, given that he's 30 points ahead in the next primary?
He just can't help himself, Jen. I mean, strategically, I'm sure his team has said, stop it.
Yeah,
This
stop.
interview and everyone you do should be about Joe Biden. But he can't help himself. He's out there selling sneakers. By the way, you showed a picture of him or a little footage. He looks worse and worse every day. Maybe that's why Nikki Haley's staying in. I mean, I don't know. Physically, he's obviously out there hawking perfume to cover up his smell. He's, shoes.
Sneakers.
But at the end of the day, he is the Republican Party. And, maybe the best Haley could hope is somehow pull a surprise, get north of 40. Maybe she can do a little better of that in some Super Tuesday states. Obviously, if Trump were to get any more legal trouble, it would just help him in the primary. So maybe she's hanging around in case there's a health issue. I will say this, though. Those clips you just saw, and there's more, the Biden campaign and Democrats can feed those to voters in battleground states as a reminder. Not Joe Biden's not saying these things, Nikki Haley is. And, some of that will get discounted because she ran against him. So I think that'll be a big part of the Biden campaign is having Republican voices out there that you're feeding to the couple million people that decide this election. So I look at that and there could be some compelling content. But at the end of the day, it does strike me that Donald Trump weeks ago should have moved on from Nikki Haley, and he won't. And so let's say she loses by 30 points on Saturday. He will still be focused on her heading into March, not on the general election, which is, again, just epic political malpractice.